Was in the paper every night as the blonde bomber.
Can you see it now?
And Coach Burkett said that their team, he unfortunately didn't get to be on the winning team because he was still in junior high. And so when he went to Tech, mainly because he wanted to be a coach, but he studied engineering and ended up with that. My father hired him. That's how we met. He was his boss. No, I told my dad, fire him unless he marries me. And so I had to chase him until he caught me. So we didn't meet until he was back. I lost my train of thought now with your jokes. Anyway, Coach Burkett, who was the Tech coach, said that Nolan's, I don't know if I said his name, Nolan, that team was the best team he ever had. But you know, with basketball, as with many other things, there's a little luck involved. But they did very well. They went downstate, but they didn't make it on that last game, I guess. And then we both went to Irving School. We lived 2 blocks away from each other. And I went back, after I started college, Mr. Hayward called me. I suppose some of you know him. O.B. Hayward called my mother and asked her what I was doing. And I was working part-time at the phone company on, Rimback? And she told him that, and that I was going to school too. He said, oh, I wanted her to work for me as my secretary because I remember her well. So I jumped at the chance because Nolan and I had met by then and wanted to get married. So I wanted to stash some money away. I think I was paid $20 a week. And so then we got married in Hammond and lived in Hammond for a while. We moved to Highland quite a while ago. Our first daughter was born in Hammond. And the things I remember from downtown, being that I was a telephone operator, I would love to go to Breho's and have lunch. I just loved Breho's. And farther down, of course, it's not in downtown, but Nolan and I always liked going to Maidright's, and we ended up living across the street from Mrs. Langmaid in Highland. And I always wanted her to give me her pie recipes, but she wouldn't do it. She's still alive, but she won't. She moved from our street to a condo. And my favorite thing, it's not downtown exactly either, but I went to Hammond High and I didn't learn to read or write, but I loved to draw pictures, and I loved Olga Schubkegel. She was wonderful. And Nolan and I would even go see her, and I took my son, who worked for Bob Hirsch for a while, to see her, and because he's an artist now and designer. And we'd love to go to Breho's and Miner and Dunn's on Calumet, a little off the downtown, and Maidright's near the school. And I guess I had some other things in mind, but my mind's not working too well today, so that's about it.
You want to?
I'll just add, my name's Nolan Auburn, as she mentioned. I remember the Hammond Civic Center.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Go ahead.
And that was a jumping place at one time. You couldn't even get through the doors. They were lined up outside. That's when basketball was basketball. So that's, I started at Irving. I played for Pat Patterson, who later went to Hammond High as assistant coach. At that time, Irving had 2 years of high school. So after 2 years, Tech won the state championship. So, hey, I'm going to Tech. And I'm glad I did. I played for Lou Burkett for 2 years. And I had a chance to go to Valparaiso University to play ball.
With the tallest team of the nation.
At the time.
At the time, yeah.
And they traveled all over the world, by the way. But the war came along, and that kind of put the end to that. Never got back to it. Thank you.
All right, we will go back to, I made a promise, I will come back to you. All right.
My name is Doris Kaplan Schlensky. As my husband told you before, we met in high school. I was born in Hammond in 1926. We met each other in high school, went steady for 2 years until Jerry went to the service. He was in the Navy for 2 years in 1944. When he got back from the service, we got married. My father offered him a job in our business, and Jerry took the offer, and we were married shortly after. This is the part of the story that's so unusual. He'd worked there about 6 months, and my father said to him, "There's some boxes of old sales receipts upstairs that I think we should get rid of. Why don't you go up and just toss them in the garbage?" To preclude part of this, when my father opened the floor covering business, he sold furniture originally. And Jerry's mother, when she had Jerry, came to our store and bought a high chair for Jerry. When he was carrying this box of records downstairs, part of the box fell and the papers fell all over the floor. As he was leaning over to pick up the papers, the receipts, the sales receipts, he looked at one of them and it said, "This sale was made for one high chair to Shirley Schlensky in 1926. And he couldn't believe what he was reading. He didn't even know that my father sold baby furniture at the time, because it was always floor covering after that. And so this is, little did he know that when he was born, his mother bought his high chair from his future father-in-law.
That's great. Okay, Mrs. Bloom over here, I guess it was? Okay. I'm going to just go ahead and hold that and speak.
My name is Esther Bloom. I'm from Calumet City, and my age, I'm 88, but the 23rd of September, I'll be 89 years old. And I give all the blessings to my Jesus, because he's the one that gave me the good health, and I took care of my health. And my Lord always told me what to say and how to act, and I tried to please my Lord all the time. And so I'm so happy that I got to meet and hear some of these testimonies that these ladies have said. It was very interesting. And I'll tell you about my dad. My dad was a streetcar conductor way back there when the barns were on the Goslin Street. And he took the first car out of the barn every morning at 4 o'clock. My mother used to have to get in the car and drive him over to the bus station, to the barn, and he'd take the car, and my mother would come home. She did that for many years. And my dad, he was a wonderful man. He lived to be 83 years old. And I can say that he's done a lot for the community. He had the first milk dairy in Hammond. So he had the first dairy in Hammond, and he sold his dairy to Hammond Dairy way back then. And I have the bill of sales where he sold it to the Hammond Dairy back there. And anybody that lived on the north side over there by where Howard Johnson is, my dad, them days he didn't have to pay no rent. He had all that land for his cattle. So that's why he could have the dairy. But then when they sold all that land, my dad had to give it up because it was too much for him. And then he was a streetcar conductor for 35 years on the Hammond. He used to go from State and Holman to South 63rd and South Park. He had that run. And everybody just loved my dad. And I'll tell you one story. My dad, a lot of the motormen used to get mad at him because the girls that worked at Bogo's, they'd get through work about 1 o'clock. And my dad's streetcar was the last one to go to the barns. But he always waited for those ladies to come out. And the motorman was so mad. He said, "What are you doing, Swanson? We got to get going." But my dad waited. And when my dad died, we didn't even know all the people that worked at Vogel's came to my dad's funeral. And we didn't even, they said, "We know your dad. He was a most wonderful man. He never let us stand stranded. He always picked us up and took us home." And I can say a lot of good things about my dad. He did a lot of good things, and I'm so happy to be Swanson.
Tell them about Goldblatt's working.
Oh, yes, and I worked for Goldblatt 36 years. I started out in South Chicago, and then when they bought the Hammond store, the manager said, "Miss Esther, don't you want to go to Hammond, but just near your home?" I said, "Oh, I'd love it." So they transferred me from there, and I was up in the head cashier's office in Hammond for 30 years. And I know what a wonderful outfit they were to work for. And everybody loved Goldblatt. Remember on Thursday how they used to get there early and line around the stores to get into that store? I can always remember. Well, thanks for letting me talk.
Sure. Thank you very much. And great. Okay, and I'm coming over to you two. Who wants to speak?
No, I don't have any.
Oh, come on now. Go ahead.
We have only lived here around 50 years. We moved to East Chicago, Indiana in 1937, and I worked at Inland Steel for 38 years. My name is Carter Martin, and I worked there for 38 years in various positions. And it was just like home to us when we moved from Attica, Indiana, which was a small town. Probably some of you know where Attica is. But we moved there, and then we moved to Hammond, and we've lived in Hammond ever since. And it's been an interesting experience. And as I listen to these people tell about their experiences here with Goldblatt's and Fox and Brejos, it brings back fond memories, I'll tell you. And I just want to thank you for the opportunity to say something here. I didn't think I would say anything this afternoon because I just wanted to listen. And I am a part of Hammond too, 50 years in the Hammond area. And it's been a great experience. And this is my wife Olive here, and she came from Attica, Indiana, and we've been married, it'll be 63 years in October. And I was just 87 years old. This lady's a year ahead of me down here. And